Hello, thank you for watching my video. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe and comment, and also check out the description below where you'll find a link which I'll mention during the course of this video. Edward I's reputation as a warrior king is well known. After all, he is still known today as the Hammer of the Scots and brutal oppressor of the Welsh, and his castle building, particularly in Wales, stands testament today of his military exploits. But what was he like as a man? Here I'll give a brief overview of his physical appearance and some of his personality traits. One of his most famous features is his drooping eyelid, which he inherited from his father, Henry III. Physically, he was powerful. A tall man, he was around 6'2", and he earned the nickname after his death of Longshanks, meaning long legs. His physique made him the perfect specimen for a soldier and warrior. His long and muscular legs meant he was excellent in the saddle, capable of controlling even the most temperamental of horses, and his long arms meant he was a natural with the sword. As a young man, he is said to have had fair hair. As he got older, his hair grew darker until he reached old age when his hair became white. His speech was hindered slightly by a lisp, but this did not detract from his speaking skills. Whether it was to inspire an army or to give an order, his lisp did not undermine Edward's complete authority. Quite predictably for a king like this, he was very keen on the hunt, and he chased down unfortunate creatures himself rather than relying on traps, which would have been the safer and easier thing to do. He particularly enjoyed hunting stags. As you can imagine, this would have been quite a sight. He is also said to have been a man blessed with luck. As a young prince, the story goes that Edward was playing chess one day when, for no particular reason, he arose from his seat and he left the room. The story goes, a moment later, a stone came crashing down where he had been sitting. The stone is said to have been rather large and would have possibly killed the young prince. This may be fictional, but Edward was blessed with some luck growing up, having to fight off several illnesses in a time where child death rates were tragically high, even for children of royalty. Before he became king, Edward had gone on crusade, during which he nearly died. He was attacked by an assassin whom he fought off, but Edward had been seriously wounded. A famous story goes that his wife, Eleanor of Castile, sucked out the poison of Edward's wounds, supposedly saving his life. Once again, this gives you an idea of the good fortune that is said to have blessed Edward. One thing that is not in question, however, is Edward's relationship with his wife and would-be Queen Eleanor of Castile. He loved her dearly, and when she died, he was absolutely distraught, erecting what was to become known as the Eleanor Crosses during the funeral procession back down to London. Eleanor had died whilst Edward was on campaign in the north of England. This shows you another side to Edward. Whilst he is a ferocious and formidable warrior king, he still has a very human side to him, and his relationship with Eleanor certainly brought that out. So whilst it's very tempting to just think of people like Edward I as being brutes that lived a long time ago, Actually, we have to remember that they are more nuanced than that, and they are, in fact, very human people with very human emotions, and Edward showed that very much by his love for Eleanor. Having praised Edward for his softer side, it still has to be said that he was very much a man of his time, and also a man whose patience was not to be pushed beyond its limitations. Two men who managed to do this was Edward's own son, Edward of Carnarvon, and his friend, Piers Gaveston. Their increasingly impertinent behaviour enraged the old king, and Piers was driven away from court, and Prince Edward was on the receiving end of several furious outbursts from his father. You can find more detail on that in a video I have done on Edward II, as he was to become, and Piers Gaveston. I'll provide the link in the description below. However, a truly dark side of Edward I's personality was fully exposed on the capture of the Welsh prince Dafydd ap Griffith. Wales had given Edward I numerous headaches during his reign, and so when Dafydd was captured, he decided to send the country a stark warning. The prince was hung, drawn and quartered, becoming the first prominent person to suffer such a dreadful fate. Having said all this, Edward I was everything one could ask for in a medieval king, and he even demonstrated some of this while still only a prince. In 1264, things looked bad for Edward's father, Henry III, who had been defeated at the Battle of Lewes by Simon de Montfort, who had also, at the battle, managed to capture Prince Edward. But by showing cunning and trickery, Edward managed to escape and return to his father, where he led the Royalist fight back. Edward routed Simon de Montfort at the Battle of Evesham in 1265. In short, already Edward was completely overshadowing his father and showing the signs of truly great kingship, while still only a relatively young man. So to summarise this video, you may have noticed a couple of things. I've not structured the video in chronological order, and I've done that purposely, as I wanted to really emphasise Edward's personality traits and not to turn this into a historical biography. This is more looking at Edward as a man rather than looking at the events, which is what I normally do. I hope I have given some depth to who I think Edward was. He was a tall, strong, fearless, relentless and ruthless man. The fact that he died whilst on his way to campaign against Scotland shows you what type of man he was. He must have known he was ill and dying when he eventually died in 1307, but the fact is he still wanted to take the fight to Scotland, which brings me on to another point. Is you may have noticed in the video that I've not really discussed the wars in Scotland too much. I think that would make a really good video for another day, but that's going to be one of my more historical, in-depth videos. This is one of my separated videos, that ones that are looking purely at the man rather than the actual history of his reign, which is what I normally do. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I hope it has emphasised in some detail as to who I think this brilliant king was. It cannot be underestimated how phenomenal Edward was as a king. He was just the very definition of medieval kingship.